From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts. Welcome to Community Catalysts, the podcast that explores the qualities of community leadership and the many paths and forms it can take. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman, and welcome to a forum dedicated to helping civic leaders build trust, foster collaboration, and strengthen the effectiveness of local governance. Each episode, we aim to offer insights and experiences to help you navigate real-world leadership challenges and enable you to make a lasting impact in your community. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. In a combat zone in the Middle East, Command Sergeant Major Mike Oakley was responsible for more than 400 people, keeping them safe from enemy fire, the threat of kidnappings, and even the distractions of whatever might be happening at home. Every decision carried weight, every moment demanded focus, and leadership meant ensuring mission readiness while keeping his team grounded. After that final deployment and following 39 years and 10 months of military service, he retired, taking with him hard-earned lessons in leadership, lessons that, quite honestly, those of us who have not served may never fully or sufficiently appreciate, but must always respect. Now, as mayor of Centreville, Alabama, a peaceful, close-knit community of 3,000 along the Cahaba River, he applies those leadership principles to an entirely different mission: strengthening civic life, fostering collaboration, and guiding his community toward growth and revitalization. Mayor Mike Oakley, thank you for your service and welcome to Community Catalysts.
Matt, it is a pleasure to be here, and it was my honor to serve.
Well, it's my honor to have you joining us today, and thanks so much for being open to this conversation. Mayor, I want to start here. Everyone knows I have kind of a standard guest questionnaire that I ask everyone to help prepare for coming on the show. And I ask the question for people to self-identify. I ask, whether by gender, age, race, religion, or other factors. You made an interesting choice. You answered with just one word. Why is it that out of all of the ways you could have responded, the only identity you chose to state is American?
I think, it goes back to I had an extremely patriotic family, grandfather who lied about his age and to fight in World War I. And, my dad and granddad here were always the kind that insisted that you take your hat off and put your hand over your heart during the national anthem. And then later on, when I got into the military service, it is shocking. It was shocking because I was like any other American kid, chasing girls, trying to get my car the most hot rod it could be, and that kind of deal, and growing our hair out, and that kind of deal. In the service, you learn, the first thing you learn is adherence to a model, and then you learn service above self. So it's selfless service that you learn that it is possible to serve something and love something that is bigger than yourself, because you see that if you don't see that you're all in it together in a mission-oriented surrounding, then you won't succeed. And so I think, that, gosh, I'm proud to be an American. I've been all over the world, and I've seen some neat places and met some great people. So, some of my best friends are in Iceland and Scotland and Ireland from a track team experience at the University of Alabama. But gosh, man, of all my friends, they came here, to go to school. They came here to live for that period, and they still have fond memories of everything American, even though they're Icelandic, they're Irish, they're Scottish, they're Ethiopian. One of my best friends was from Uganda. And their ideal, we were the ideal. So, after going across the world and seeing conditions and seeing different religions and ways of life, it's hard to beat being an American.
Is there a particular moment or an experience or something that actually pointed you in the direction of public service?
We got married in 92, my wife and I, I was working at the University of Montevallo in sports administration, and she is a nurse in Tuscaloosa. I don't know if you know where we are, but Tuscaloosa is on one side 30 minutes, and Montevallo is on the other side about 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were thinking, where would we want to live? A great uncle had recently died, had a little house on the Cahaba River, and his son called and said, "Hey, where are y'all going to live?" And I said, "We're trying to figure out where we're going to live." And he says, "Why don't you take Dad's house? It would save me. He would love it, and it'd be a great way for y'all to start." So I say in a good way, we kind of got stuck here. So I told my wife, I grew up here. I never had ideals, Matt, about moving back here because I like the bright lights, big city. I like the opera. I like plays. I like movies. I like to go to fine places to eat and, fun places after hours. And that does not exist in most small towns in Alabama. Even though you're within distance, you're still driving, which is not always a good thing. And I think it was the fact that I said, we've got to either make a difference or make a move. So I volunteered for the Chamber of Commerce, and I volunteered for it's called the Schools Foundation, where you raise funds for teachers for classroom supplies and anything they might need. And the other one, of course, the Chamber of Commerce is community business based. And I ended up being elected president of the Chamber of Commerce, and I ended up being president of the Schools Foundation, 2 or 3 years down the road. So it showed me the value of like commitment, selfless service, service above self. And those things were all to promote the city, or they were to promote teachers. And that kind of gave me the incentive. A buddy of mine was on the school board and called me out of the blue and said, "Are you interested in being on the school board?" And I said, I'd covered school boards in journalism, and I'd seen good and bad. And I said, I've never thought about it. What's the problem? He said, I don't like, it's not for me, And so anyway, I ran for school board, beat a former superintendent, and that started a 23-year term on the school board. Most as chairman is voted by my peers. So, Matt, just by virtue of, and I like to say that it's, and I hate to bring attention to myself, but every organization I've been involved with, I have risen at some point to a level of authority, whether it's chairman of the school board, president of the school foundation, president of the Chamber of Commerce. I just got through with a 6-year term as president of the Enlisted Association of the state of Alabama, that kind of deal. But when I get into something, and I think this goes into my DNA and the way I was raised, I don't just raise my hand and say, "I solemnly swear." I go beyond that. I go, there's training that I can get to make me the best I can be. And here it's offered by the Alabama League of Municipalities and the Auburn Center for Responsible Government. And so those are two things that you can reach out and you can be trained in how to be the best mayor you can be, best city council person you can be. So I've done that, and I was the first one to achieve master board status with our school board, which means not a hill of beans to somebody who doesn't care about it. But to get that status, you've had to go to this training class and that training class and take this exam and know that what teacher units mean to the overall and curriculum changes mean. So, that kind of deal I've just kind of always been really passionate about and tried to rise to the top for me so I wouldn't be caught unaware or I wouldn't shortchange anybody that counted on me to help them.
I want to fast forward a little bit. I want to ask you about as I mentioned in the introduction, your last military deployment, which I understand started in 2013, right?
Yeah.
So it put you in command of more than 400 people in a combat zone, a situation where, if you don't mind my saying, shit gets real. It doesn't really get much more real than that, right? And I have to imagine it takes decades of experience and plenty of trial by fire to be entrusted with that kind of responsibility, to be a command sergeant major. And I want to just ask you, even with all that training in the combat zone, are there moments that nothing fully prepares you for?
Yes. And I'll tell you a funny story, but here you are in the middle of a combat zone and you're responsible for all these troops. And we were actually over every country in the Middle East except for Iran. So in the middle of all this, one of our sergeants comes in, and a girl, and hands me an email, and she says, what do you think about this? And it was from a guy that she had married. He had basically dumped her kids off with her mom, spent about all of her money buying a motorcycle and guns. And he said, oh, by the way, I'm moving up to my brother in Illinois. Well, I looked at her and I said, this is not good. And what we're going to do is go down to the JAG office, and then you're going to do what they tell you to do. So they got her out of she had also given him power of attorney, which is, you're in control of my life. It was just one of those bad choices. So in the middle of all this, and we had about 6 births while we were there, not there in the Middle East, but back home. And so we had to scramble and arrange for FaceTime events, FaceTime moments, which was important, to the troops, because one thing I noticed that when things get, I guess it's ADHD, Matt, because when things get crazy, I get kind of calm. When everything's calm, I get crazy. So it's one of those deals. So
let me get this straight. What you're saying is that being on mission, you're fully trained for, you know how to do that. You're saying the stuff that you don't get fully trained on, some of the stuff you have to figure out along the way, are all the distractions from it, the personal lives of people. That's what you got to figure it out in the moment.
In the military, like on a mission-based deployment, your life is kind of planned out. It's easy. It's easy. It's an easy life. You know where you've got to be, when you've got to be, and what you've got to do, and who you got to do it with. You're also worried about, in my position, in the commanding general's position, you're worried about the welfare of them, not only there, but back home. And I had a family, wife and 3 kids, and thank the Lord that I had, my mom and dad were younger, and they really stepped up and took care of the kids, because my wife's a nurse, and nurses work those crazy, whether it's 312s or night shifts and stuff like that. So having home support was really important, but also making sure that your soldiers had home support. So you do something called a family plan with every one of them, and you say, you've got to give me your family plan so we'll be prepared for any eventuality. God forbid one of you get killed, and because I'm probably going to be the one that has to call your next of kin. And I don't want to do that without being prepared or even knowing who it is or what's going on. So I really had to learn just about everybody's family structure. And I knew a lot of them anyway. I know it's funny to say that many people, but in a unit like that, you really get close. You have family days where you get to meet families and wives, and Lord, there were the minor surgeries, there was the financial problems, there was breakups, there were divorces that happened long distance, and you're 8 hours time difference. That was one of the hardest things to balance.
Hey, Mayor, you've served both in military command and in elected office. What is something that people commonly misunderstand about leadership in those two very different realms?
I think the biggest misconception, and there are people with born with the characteristics of a leader. Whether they develop that or not, it's up to them. There are people that are born without any leadership characteristics. And that doesn't mean they can't be in a leadership position, but it makes it a lot harder for them to function. So I think the basic thing is, if you make a decision to run for mayor, and when you get promoted in the military, there are certain things you have to do in order to be promoted. You have to serve this long. You have to do these things. You have to pass an interview in order to be promoted. And in the civilian world, it's not that cut and dried, because you could have somebody that goes, I'm retired and I'm bored. I think I'm going to run for city council or mayor, and they get it. Well, then you're the dog that caught the car. What do I do now? If you're not prepared, number one, leadership wise, or strong enough in your self confidence, that you can easily be torn down by somebody who has an agenda against you, or can sense that weakness. Because, as I said, in the absence of leadership, you create that void. That void will be filled by something. And I think the misconceptions are that anybody can just jump into a position and take off with it and be super successful without some kind of preparation. And a lot of people don't realize what goes into, before you're even a mayor, or while you're a mayor, what you need to do to be a mayor, what you need to do to be a city council person, that kind of deal. what does it take to be a talk show host?
Having a microphone, that's pretty much the threshold here. But leadership, it isn't just about accomplishing a mission. It's also about sustaining the people who make the mission possible. And so I guess I'm wondering, in both military and in local government, is this a chicken and egg question? Does success depend on strong teams, or do strong teams depend on a clear mission? Which way do you think of it?
Gosh, man, those are two good scenarios, and I think either one could succeed. A mission galvanizes people, whether it be we've got to do better on our garbage cleanup, we got to do better on our pothole repair, street paving. That's a mission, and that's something that everybody sees pretty much the same way. The other way, could be a success too, just the same, but it depends on the situation, I think, entirely, because sometimes you're given a mission that you didn't ask for. How you gonna accomplish that mission? And the other side is, what do we need to do leading up to this mission to accomplish things that we want to accomplish? What do we need to do as individuals and leaders and as a team? Because I don't think anybody successful has ever done anything on their own. Just through history, you can look, and they either had a great mom and dad home environment, they had a great teacher that really impacted their life somewhere along the line, they had a great coach. Coaches have a huge impact on children in school, especially if you're a little bit athletic, minded and oriented. And coaches have literally determined the course of life in some people. But I think the teamwork aspect, and it's not always easy to work in a team because you've got dynamic personalities, and you've always got stronger people and weaker people, and never the twain shall meet, so to speak. So how do you, and the more you go through those scenarios, the quicker you are to realize that those are two weak people. These are two very strong people. You got to keep those strong people from butting heads, or from, it's better, it's the old adage, it's better to be quiet and thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. Well, you kind of got to sit back and go, hey, all right, here's where we are, y'all. We got two strong people over here. Y'all have definite ideas how you want to do this. Let's get together and talk about it. We all want the same thing.
I want to press you on this a little bit because I'm really interested. I imagine, again, I have not served. I imagine in the military, the mission comes down through the chain of command. It's very clear what the mission is, and the support is literally that. It's support to accomplish the mission, but there is no question that the mission has to be accomplished.
Right.
In Centreville, I imagine that even in a strong mayor form of government, you don't always get to use the chain of command to tell the council or to tell the community what needs to be done. You certainly have a bully pulpit to get things done, but in community life, it's very common that either a council gets together, or sometimes you do a whole public engagement process, and sometimes the council or the community gets to decide among itself, these are outcomes that we want to accomplish, and Mayor, as our chief executive, we're giving you the mission to do it. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it, that in the military, mission, it's not 100%, 0%, but the weight of it goes to mission. In community life, the weight of it goes to the community, the team that has to feel together. Am I overstating that?
Nope. I think you're right on, Matt. And I think that's a great point to bring out, that once again, collaborative, efforts, whether you're talking about what kind of Christmas tree are we going to have to do a joint city lighting at the culmination of our Christmas parade. Well, if you just make a decision on, you wouldn't believe the little old ladies that this is the kind of tree we're looking at. Oh, we can't do that kind of tree. Why would you do that kind of tree? It's that kind of deal. So then you get into the deal like that. But I think you're right on in that aspect, because in the military, you're given a mission and you train for that mission, and you have trained for that mission. And so everybody's role that has to, for mission accomplishment. In a city environment, let's say you're given a mission, you have no idea what a lot of people's strengths or weaknesses or interests or agendas are in certain things. So you've got to kind of pull everybody together. And I'll tell you a good example.
Yeah.
We had a dangerous intersection in our town, and I mean, like 8 people had gotten killed, and the Department of Transportation would not admit that it was a dangerous intersection. Naturally, because they created the intersection. So we went down to the governor's office, and I represented the school board then, and we go down there and we argue for a solution to this dangerous intersection. And I got a friend of mine that's a pilot, took me up. We took aerial photos. We had a really good presentation. And in the end, the Department of Transportation has started these things what they call J-turns. I'm not sure if you know what they are. Like, instead of going down a road and going, here's where I turn left to go to Centreville, you got to go a quarter of a mile and turn and come back, which is kind of you don't want anybody to pass your town and not come back. You don't want anybody to pass your town and go, well, I passed it, I might as well go to the next town.
Right.
You want to show off what you got. So we go down there and sure enough, their solution was not at all what we envisioned or what we wanted, but there hadn't been a death at that intersection since they put it in. So, the outcome was what we kind of went down there to argue about. The means to get to that outcome was totally different than what we had argued for. So that was pretty funny. And we had a public hearing. It got really contentious, but everybody wanted the same thing: a safer intersection.
Even at the expense of whatever economic activity might have come.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm listening to this, and what comes to mind is, in the military, mission comes first. In community life, I think you're saying togetherness comes first.
I really think that. And on the school board, the children came first. When we made a decision, I was the chairman of the school board. And in every meeting, I'd say, y'all remember, if it's good for the children, it's good for us. Community, if it's good for our community, y'all, it's going to be good for everybody. Whether you're talking about economic development or water treatment or traffic light or speed bumps. Lord, we had you talk about getting some people up in arms, talk about putting a speed bump somewhere in a well-traveled area, even though they tend to go fast, you'll have people coming out of the woodwork, but it's an aspect of public safety, and it's almost what I would call a necessary evil. And we put one on the road the other day that they've come about 3 times and asked for help. Well, the police can't be there 24/7. And, people that tend to speed on little straightaways, they kind of know when the police are there and when they're not. So, you do something to alter behavior. I'm not saying that, hey, we're cracking down, we're just altering behavior. When you come through here, we need you to slow down because there are people with children who play near or at the street. And so their safety is the main concern, whether you like speed bumps or not. I don't like them, but they are a necessary evil.
Mayor, let's talk about Centreville a little bit. As we were preparing for today, you told me that you want the community to look like a Hallmark movie, which to me sounds kind of like a vision statement. It's high-level aspirational. But because of your military experience, you know something about what it means to be mission-focused. So I'd like to know how you transform that vision into a mission. What do you actually do to drive that direction?
If you've ever been through a strategic planning process, it's pie in the sky. Affordability is not even in the equation. You talk about things that you would like to have or like to see. So it was part of a strategic planning process that, hey, and we've got a historic town square. It's really pretty. But it needs some facelift. It needs some businesses in buildings that aren't occupied. How you gonna do that? Well, the first thing we did, Matt, of all things, is we got these Christmas lights strung up over the streets, and you would not believe the positive impact that one little inexpensive act made. People came up now; they're doing wedding pictures, they're doing prom pictures, they're doing girlfriend-boyfriend pictures under the lights, Main Street, Centreville. And right next to it is the late 1800s 3-story bank building that's absolutely gorgeous, in the process of being renovated. Right across the street, we've got our Main Street. And are you familiar with Main Street, USA Main Street?
Tell us about how that's working there. It's interesting.
Well, second year of Main Street, we had to do an extensive application process. several interviews, and then we had to go make a presentation to a board. Why should Centreville be a Main Street community? And we were selected. Well, that opens you up to different possibilities of grants, Main Street inroads, economic, retail development, wayfinding, signage, and things like that. Well, the last thing, the most recent thing that happened is we got a $42,000 grant for facade improvements. Well, all the business owners uptown are in the process, and by July, they're supposed to have their facades updated. And so that's going to transform the look of Centreville in itself. So we started off with just a simple lighting over the street, kind of going from light pole to light pole. And it made such a positive impact that now this facade, following on to that, now the end of last year, we were awarded about a $900,000 transportation alternative grant, which will be everything but transportation or the roads itself. It's the sidewalks, it's the signage, it's the foliage coming into Centreville all the way into our Main Street designated area. So, while we're doing facade upgrades and beautification efforts, we're going to have this whole concept of the whole city is going to be transformed for the first time in its existence, from coming off of the State Road 82 to downtown or uptown. We call it. I don't know if you've ever been here. We're on a hill right above the Cobble River. And when you go down the hill, there's a bridge, two bridges, and right on the right is the high school football field. It's beautiful. And then it goes into the rest of Centreville, which we call downtown. And then you take a right and you're in our healthcare zone. I don't know if you know, but we're literally the epicenter of rural healthcare in the Southeast. We've got while hospitals all over are closing, we've got Bibb Medical Center that's a hospital, emergency room, nursing home, and concentric circles of care, independent living, nursing home, retirement cottages that they've built where there's a huge waiting list. And those things get help from the hospital. On the flip side, we've got Cahaba Medical Center that is a federal grant machine. And right now we're writing grants for interns to come here. So our problem now is having enough houses to house these doctors that we've got, these interns, LPNs, and CRNAs that are going through training through the hospital. So the hospitals have joined us with a grant initiative. They said, if you can get a grant that's good for the community, we will pay the matching funds. That's huge.
Mayor, two last quick questions on this topic.
Yeah.
If we check back in 10 years, what's one or two things that we will see in Centreville, Alabama, that will show us that you were successful in your mission?
Centreville will be known as a tourism destination. The Cahaba River, Matt, we didn't even talk about it. In the warm months, I live on the river. Every morning in the weekends, you're awakened to the sounds of people laughing and yelling at each other, splashing, going down the river in tubes, kayaks, or canoes, or fishing. And so we're already a tourism destination, but as far as like getting people into everything, so I want uptown to be, you'd see an arts and crafts type feel. You'd have a bougie type, stores. You'd have that beautiful old historic bank building. The first floor would have some kind of a sports bar in it. The second floor is a business scene. The top floor would be loft apartments. So really livability, enhanced look, really building on the historic past of Centreville. And we've got an old stagecoach stop that was the headquarters of first Confederate soldiers and secondly of Union soldiers. And it's a beautiful building that's on the National Historic Register. And the downtown Centreville is on the National Historic Register. So in 10 years, if you saw it now, and in 10 years, you would not believe the difference that it's going to make, still retaining the hometown feel and hometown inclusion that we're proud of.
Mayor, I have one last question I want to ask you. Earlier, we talked about the balance between advancing a mission and sustaining support, which is about driving toward a goal while also keeping people engaged and unified. We live in very divisive times. And I'm interested to know, what do you see as the role and responsibility of local leaders in striking that balance between mission and, as you say, togetherness. What are the qualities of leadership that local leaders like you need to be practicing in this moment right now?
I think in every community, you have movers and shakers and difference makers. It's the old adage of 20% of the people do 90% of the work, whether it's a committee or a group. And it's kind of true. You got to identify those people that are movers and shakers. And like for Main Street, for example, we quickly assembled a board of movers and shakers. I guess we're probably ahead of the curve of any other Main Street community. I think they'd agree with us on that as far as like what we got in place, work plans, and things like that. So I think really to be able to identify the people, movers and shakers, and hey, by the way, some of those people may be your rival down the road because, there's always somebody that think they can do your job better. But you've got to overlook that and go, if that person's valuable to what we're doing, then we need him or her involved. And, they'll worry about that down the road. But right now, in this Main Street community, we have a mission and we've got to work that mission. Same with the Chamber of Commerce, same with the mayor, city council on things we do, and same with our work crews. I've got my assistant water superintendent in there right now, and just a wonderful young man. And we look for great things for him, and he's really good at collaborating. He was in the Navy. There's another vet. So he knows kind of what it takes to build a team and work together and those kind of deals. I think you got to identify the leaders in your community, go to them, and hopefully you will have developed a circle of influence and friends even, and even enemies that, that can respect you. And you get everybody together and go, here's where we're going. Here, we need you involved. Because so many times we overlook the talent in our communities because we don't ask them to do anything. The big knock is like, there's nothing to do. Well, has anybody ever asked you to do anything? Not really. Hey, how about you being on the recreational committee? How about you, helping with the uptown planning? How about you being on this economic development group? Because, you've got some, hey, flower garden ladies, the master gardeners we've got here. Would y'all be interested in doing a project uptown? Yes, we'd love it. Nobody ever asked them. So really I guess it's the sales pitch of the, 9 out of 10 people don't ever ask, make the ask.
How interesting that someone who understands what it is to lead by mission chooses to answer the question that in this moment, the priority is about bringing people together.
Yeah. We've all seen the social media yelling across the aisles and virtue signaling and blanking people out and all that kind of crap. But, the big picture, you want to say, folks, the big picture is we're all in this together. Unless we can get some kind of consensus on how to move forward, then we're forever stuck where we want to go. And if you do what you've always done, you get what you've always got.
Mayor Mike Oakley, thank you for this conversation. It has been an absolute delight to visit with you. And I'm just so grateful for your openness and you're willing to talk about your military experience, your civic experience in Centreville. I'm very grateful to you. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Matt, I'm the one that's grateful for the opportunity to talk to you. And it's so fascinating, to see you do community catalysts and learn from your interviews about how other people do things. I often say that, you can have the most extensive training resume in the history of the world, but you really learn from your peers who have already been there and done that. You go, how did you handle this situation? What would you do different? So the pleasure was mine because I've really learned from talking to you today about some things that I need to be better on and how to articulate my mission and vision.
Well, you're doing a great job. Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for your service.
Matt, I look forward to seeing you, and it was my honor to serve.
Again, thank you to my guest, Mayor Mike Oakley of Centreville, Alabama. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Your feedback helps others discover the show. And don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. This episode was edited by Nick Living the Dream Tantillo. Our executive producer is John Little. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. If you have a question or a comment about today's topic, I'd love to hear from you. Reach me at 602-688-2724 or Matt, M-A-T-T, at socialprosperity.us. Do you have a story of lessons learned on your journey to leadership? click the podcast guest link in the program notes. I'm always looking for instructive and inspiring voices to feature on the show. You know, on this podcast, I often say that we're here to tap into the hard-earned experiences of people on their journey to leadership. And in closing, I have to acknowledge that I haven't had the privilege to interview anyone whose insights have been more hard-earned than Mayor Mike Oakley. I'm truly grateful to him for sharing his experience so openly. He's given us all a powerful reminder that responsible and effective leadership isn't just about relentlessly pursuing a mission. It's about building trust, fostering resilience, and truly understanding the people you lead, what drives them, and what holds them back. In these divisive times, that's a leadership lesson local leaders can't afford to overlook. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.